Anyone who knows me knows that I and my family are avid thrift store shoppers. And back in the day, my sister and I used to get together and put our kids in the back of the car, and we go thrift shopping anywhere. It didn't matter. And this particular day, we had heard about 2 new shops that opened up. And we'd never been that way before, so we decided to load our kids in the car and take them for this little trip. Well, we started off, and as we hadn't gone for maybe 5 minutes, when all of a sudden we heard a siren. And we assumed that it was an ambulance or a fire truck or something like that. So we just kept driving and kept looking for it, and we didn't see it, so I just pulled over to wait until it came close to us. And we sat there for a while, and it never showed up, so we said, well, we'll keep driving, and when you see it, I told my little sister, when you see it, tell me, and I'll pull back over. So we kept driving, and the siren kept going, and so we figured, well, it must be a fire truck or some fire trucks on a parallel street. So we kept driving, and after a while, it got louder and louder, and we thought, well, maybe we're facing it, and it's coming towards us. So, we kept looking for it and didn't see it, and we pulled over and waited, and it didn't show up, so we started driving again. And then after a while, I felt the dashboard of my car, and I felt it vibrate. And I told my little sister, I said, God, this car's shaking, and she put her hand up there, and she said, yeah, it is. And so I said, find someplace where we can pull over, because we were in the city. And find someplace safe where we can pull over. Well, we kept driving and trying to find someplace, but there were no parking spaces, nowhere we could go. And so the vibration got worse and worse, and we were starting to panic and all, and looking for a place. And finally, I saw a service station, no less. This is rational thinking. And I pulled over in the service station, we threw the doors open, grabbed our kids out and took off running, and there was this guy standing at a pump. And he was just standing there, just leaning up against the pump and looking up in outer space. And we ran over to him and said, run, the car's gonna blow up, run. And this guy just kept standing there, just as nonchalant as he could be. And so we started beating on his chest, run, this car's gonna blow up. And he looked from one of us to the other, and then he pointed to a building across the street, the roof. And there was one of these big citywide sirens that go off every Tuesday of the month. And we were driving into it and didn't know it. And this guy worked at this service station, so he knew what was happening. I tell you, we were so ashamed, we couldn't even apologize, we couldn't thank him, we couldn't even buy gas, we just got Now, you might ask, why would you tell a story that makes you look that ridiculous? Well, because that's what happened. And that was the truth. And ridiculous or not, it's what happened. Now, I've just given you a Black history lesson. It's history because it happened 47 years ago, and it's the truth. And everyone so far involved was Black. The 4 of us in the car, and the gentleman standing on the pump. Now, I can tell you what happened to the 4 of us in the car since then. My son, my nephew, my sister and I, we all keep in touch. I don't know what happened to the man who was leaning up against the pump. What he might have done was decided at that moment, I'm not going to stay here. All these hysterical women and they're screaming. I'm going back to school. I'm going to get my GED. I'm here. And he's not going back to school. He got his GED. But then he might have gotten a PhD. And so started teaching at some university. I don't know. I don't know if he bought his own service station to lean up against the pump. I have no idea what happened to that man, or that maybe he wanted to be a musician all his life and he decided that day that he was getting out of there and he was going to go and become a musician. I don't know. He might be a millionaire now. Or his son's son and his son's daughter or his daughter-in-law or someone might have studied physics and be working for NASA now. I have no idea. But that's what history does. It starts a chain of events and you follow it, if you can. And if you're a true historian, you will write it exactly as it happened. It will not change because you don't like the way it looks. It gives somebody more popularity than you do. It has nothing to do with that. It is what God has put in place. And the only thing you do is document it exactly as you understand it. Now, I'm bringing up this point because this is Black History Month, and I happen to be black. I guess you can tell that. But in any case, I want to tell you what, right now, currently, we're questioning what to put in history books. And I don't really like to get political or negative, but you know I get negative anyway. But I learned very little history in history books. Even then, there were omissions. And so we have an unnecessary, in a manner of speaking, month called Black History Month because there were omissions. There were revisions and things people didn't want to say or didn't want to hear because it might embarrass them, it might make them feel guilty, all of these things. That has nothing to do with what actually happened. What actually happened really needs to be written without bias. It needs to be factual. And it needs to be, like they say in court, tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Don't add, don't subtract, don't distract, don't do anything. Write what happened. Now I'm saying that I learned very little in history books because when I was reading about Marie Antoinette and Henry VIII and his 6 wives and, Versailles and Mozart and all of that, I never heard of Chevalier. Chevalier was of mixed race. He was an excellent violinist, is that the way you say that? He was an excellent swordsman, I'm going to say that instead of fencer, but he was. He was a composer. Why didn't I read about him? The reason I didn't read about him was because he did not fit the picture of what people wanted to read about. I watched The Race for Space, and I was fascinated by it. But what I remember most, other than the rockets taking off, was looking at Command Center. And all I saw was white shirts and black neckties. Which told me there weren't any women in there, and the only thing black was a necktie, so what was, And then I went to the show and I saw Hidden Figures. And there was this whole room of ladies. Where were they? Why wasn't that documented? Just stick it in there. You don't have to make an issue of it. Just put it there and show a few pictures because I'd never heard of Dorothy Johnson. I went and saw Women Talkers. There was this group of Navajo Indians, and I hope I'm saying what they want me to call them, but they used the code in Navajo, and the Japanese could not break it. Why didn't I know that until I went to the show? It should have been in that book. Give them credit for what they did. Now, how many years later after World War II, we're all of a sudden, wow, there they were. And we find out they didn't get credit until now. Something else I want you to read. When you don't have anything better to do, get to Matthew's 1, chapter 1, verse 1 to 24, I think it is. And I'm just going to give you an idea of what it says. It said, Adam, I've written it down the right list, but I'm not going to find it. Anyway, it said, Adam begat Jacob. Jacob begat Nathaniel. Nathaniel begat somebody by Helen. You see something missing there? Where are their wives? How did they do all of this begatting? I think it was 41 or 42. I lost count. I lost count of the begattings. There was, I think, maybe 6 women mentioned, and 2 of them were, just by the way. They get to Mary, who we don't know who begat her, but her husband Joseph becomes mentioned as the father of Jesus. Now, we're not going to get all into biblical stuff. I'm just saying, if I got to read all of this, I'd like to know who some of those ladies were. So, what we have is a stack of, we don't have history months, and I certainly don't want to see a history month color-coded. Okay, I can do fine with Black history. I mean, that's who I am, and I accept that. For me, it's okay. For others, it may not be. But we don't have a White History Month because all months are White history. Whereas our Navajo History Month, and I don't know if we have one, maybe I just don't know it. I don't want to see a color-coded anybody's History Month other than those of us who can accept it. But what we have is non-history by omission and by rejection. Nothing should be omitted unless you didn't know it. Everything that occurred needs to be there because it happened and because it's the truth. So basically, I have come to the conclusion, and things are as you see them. My way of seeing the fact that we have a Black History Month is that no one said, and it's because of omissions and distortions or whatever, no one creates a blockage for anyone unless they feel that person is a contender, unless they know their challenges. And so we have been challenged, as have many, and I'm not speaking necessarily to this group because I feel I know your heart. The people who need to feel guilty are not going to do that. The people who need to want things to be different are not going to do that. So we have to live according to the world in which we live. But I do consider it, in a way, these omissions, an admission that we had to omit because we were afraid. And no one should be afraid of looking at mankind or humanity for who they exactly are and what they exactly do. So, I'm going to finish that by saying I enjoyed this Celtic music. You have a delightful voice. You're wonderful musicians. And I'm glad to be up here and in this group of individuals whom I consider great historians. Thank you.